On this week's episode of I-501C, the podcast for nonprofit board members, we're talking grant writing. Yes, grant writing, a topic I know nothing about, but Jordan Curry does, and you're going to listen to her. Jordan is the founder of Captured Words Grant Consulting, best name ever, and she's going to share with you a little bit about the process for grant writing, when to hire a grant writer, and the services that one can provide, all in hopes of helping you and your nonprofit become more thrivable. So please enjoy this interview. All right, as you heard in the introduction, I have the pleasure of interviewing Jordan Curry today on our podcast. And Jordan, I love the name of your organization, Captured Words Grant Consulting. You got to love these writers to have these wonderful names of their organizations. But Jordan, if you would, tell the audience a little bit about yourself, your background, and how you became a grant writer.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. Thank you for having me. So I grew up as a client of a ton of nonprofits in Sarasota, and I got to see firsthand how they really changed my life and my family's life. So once I got into college and I graduated with my bachelor's in communications, I wasn't really sure what I was going to do with that degree. Technical communications was like writing manuals and stuff, and it seemed really boring as a lifelong career. So
Yes.
I discovered grant writing. And my grandmother was in the nonprofit realm as well. So the more I dived into it, the more I realized, wow, I can give back to the community that has given so much to my family, both when I was a child and when I became a mother. So the more I dived into it, the more I realized, yes, this is something I want to do. And I went and got like a certification in grant writing, and I just kept growing and learning, and I created Captured Words Grant Consulting so that I could continue to help the community to grow the nonprofits in the area and just give back to the people who gave so much to me and got me to where I am today.
So how did you learn to write grants of all things? Because maybe there is a class, and you said you got a certification, but there's kind of an art and a science to it. So do you just have to dive in and just start doing it?
Yeah, you can, but I actually signed up for a course called Through Learn Grant Writing. That's actually the name of their course, and I've been with them for 3 years. They have a group of grant consultants in there that we all learn together and we grow together. And I think typically a person's only in there for 1 year, but I've gotten so much out of the community itself that I've remained. And that's where I learned like the basics of grant writing, basics of funder relationship building, how to apply to a grant, how to write a grant, and how to report on a grant.
Oh, I love this, and I'm going to ask you to dive into those in a second. So, as you know, I do a lot of work with nonprofit boards and leaders, and oftentimes they'll go, "Oh, just go get a grant," as in, "Oh, it's easy." But there's really that art and science to it, going all the way back to, I mean, you research things, right? I mean, there's a whole process and methodology. So if I'm a nonprofit board member, what do I need to know? Educate me on the grant opportunity and process.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing to know is like winning a grant can take months or years. It's not an immediate fix. A lot of the grant opportunities have cycles to them. So just because the due date is going to be April 1st, you're not going to hear back from them most likely until the summer. So just because you took the time to write a grant doesn't mean you're going to get that money immediately. You definitely want to make sure that you're aligned with the grants that you're applying for. Otherwise, you're going to have a very low chance of winning that grant and have wasted your time. And to do that, you want to make sure that your mission is aligned with the values of the funder. Like they want to fund the same things you're trying to achieve in the community and in your nonprofit. And then just to understand, like, again, it's a long-term thing. You're not just applying for grants to hope to win fast money. You want to build a relationship with those funders that align really well with you. And then potentially you'll have a chance to have ongoing repetitive grant funding from that funder.
Okay, so what, in your experience, what are some of the challenges to securing a grant?
Sure. So last year we had some challenges with one of my nonprofits. They are very specific in certain things that they do. And we were going after grants that were highly competitive. So in order to figure out how competitive a grant is, you want to know how many applications were submitted versus how many people won a grant. You can find that information out by reaching out to the funder themselves. Oftentimes they won't give you the exact numbers, but you can get kind of a roundabout average. If it's highly competitive, you don't want to apply for that. You're going to look for something that's lower competitive. Again, gives you a better chance of winning it. You also want to pay attention to the political climate. So there's going to be certain things that are trending to be funded. So if it's like, for example, we just went through this huge federal freeze, and right now they're pulling the DEI funding. So in our grant applications in the past, DEI was something that a lot of times we would get funders were interested in funding that kind of thing. Now it's going to be something different. That's going to be pulled. It's going to be looking like something different now. So just like paying attention to what those funding priorities look like. Sometimes we also want to apply for grants when we're not ready, when we're not grant ready. So ways that we can make sure we are is having strong data tracking and impact measurements. That's something
Very
I
good.
find a lot of nonprofits are lacking. It's very important, especially starting out. It's something you want to graze over on a new nonprofit, but it's something we should prioritize.
Oh, interesting. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so what impact and data tracking does to strengthen a grant application is it shows exactly what you are doing in the community. So how many people you've served, how many lives have been impacted, and how they've been impacted.
So, do you have this big book of grants? I mean, does that exist? How do you know what grants are out there?
There's a lot of different ways. So there are various databases that exist. I personally use Instrumental. It's supposed to be the top of the line grant resource for finding them, but also it doesn't have everything. So I will use Google on my own, especially to find more local grants. I'll look at the community foundations that we have in the areas. I'll look at things like the Rotary clubs in the area. A lot of times they'll offer grants, although they may be smaller, depending on what that nonprofit's goals are. They could be a great opportunity.
And so, does a nonprofit come to you and say, "Hey, Jordan, I want to get grants," or do they have specific grants in mind, or do you even approach them with, "Hey, I saw this grant, Mr. and Mrs. Client, you ought to consider"? How does that work?
Yeah, so typically it's the first two. I will either reach out to an organization and we'll have a conversation. They'll ask me to either write grants for them, or excuse me, they'll ask me to write the grants for them that they've already found that they want to pursue. They'll
Sure.
have me review it, and I'll either agree or tell them what I think could be maybe not a great opportunity and why. But then most of the time, I am asked to create a funding strategy for them. So this is going to be like a year to 18-month roadmap where I look at the grants that have the highest, we have the best chance of winning. And then what we need to do to pursue those, and what things we can do to make those like our chances the best. So whether that's building a relationship with the funder 6 months before that grant is due, maybe it's making sure our impact and data management is up to date and like good to go. And it's going to be other things like that.
So there's really you do much more than just actually write the grant. You're helping them strategize, and you've really impacted the overall funding model. It sounds like, and so I guess it's kind of a surprise when they call you and they just want you to write the grant, and then you come and go, wait, it's just not that simple. We got to look at this, and this.
Exactly. And while I have had people who want me to just write a one-off grant for them,
Hmm.
if I'm going to work with a client over time, I require that a funding strategy be done by me before we even get started with grant writing. Because I want to make sure that I'm not wasting my time and I'm not wasting their time, and that the work that I'm doing will actually have fruit come from it.
Oh, that's great. So how many times do you have to tell them, no, this isn't the right grant for you when they call you? Does that happen a lot?
It does. It does happen quite often. Because again, like people think that you can just apply for a grant and you're going to most likely win it. And that's not the case. Like there's so much behind it, so much you have to think about between how competitive is it is really a
Yeah.
big one. A lot of times, especially with corporate grants, they are very competitive.
Okay, so that's interesting. I didn't even think about corporate grants. So tell me a little bit, if you could walk. You've got, I'll call them local grants, then right. Then you got state, you got
Mhm.
federal, corporate. So their number. What are the difference between those, all of those, and how do you look at them, and what's required for those? Both on the front end, but interestingly on the back end.
Sure. So, with federal and state funding, government funding, that is going to you're going to be looking at a very large, very intensive grant application. Those can take months to finish
Mm.
one application for those. So again, those are not going to be easy one-off grants. You're going to really have to have the strong infrastructure in your organization in order to take on that application and win it. And then once you get that funding, it's usually a large amount of funding. You're going to have specific you're going to have to have specific things you have to do in order to basically keep them happy with the money that they've given you. You've agreed to do these certain things, and you're going to have
Hmm.
to show how you're doing that, and that is very intensive tracking. So you have to have the infrastructure in your organization to handle those. For corporate grants, I think these are really great for specifically larger organizations, again, with strong infrastructure, because you have to show this corporate grant that we align with the mission that you have for your where your giving is. And um, it they corporate grants want to also benefit from helping you.
Ah,
So they're going to want someone who has a name in the community because like it's going to help them get their name out as well.
sure.
And then foundation grants, more local grants, they
Hmm.
are really in it to help the community. A lot of times they get their funding from individuals in the community who have money that they want to put back into the community in specific areas. It could be arts and humanities, it could be human services. And they'll give their money to a foundation to distribute it into those areas. So then the foundation will give grants based on those different things. They will go through the grant applications and make sure that the money's going where those donors want it to. Those are going to be a little bit easier grants, I would say,
Right.
compared to the others too. But still, you really want to have strong impact measurements, data tracking. You want to make sure that you have the infrastructure to handle the money and be able to report on it and do with it. You want to make sure that you're getting money that you're going to do with what you say in the application you're going to do with it.
So do you help organizations with the data reporting, capture, and reporting back? Or where does your consulting start and where does it end?
So I can consult and recommend things for data tracking and impact measurement. However, that's not something that I implement at this time, but it
Mm-hmm.
is something I'm thinking about bringing into my practice in the
Mm.
future because it is something that's so important. It is just like cookie cutter basic line. You need this for your nonprofit to be successful and to be able to bring in funding from donors too. Donors want to see the impact that you're making as well.
When people, some of my clients will say, we want to get a federal grant or we got this opportunity, and I go, ooh, this is my knowledge. Be careful.
Yes.
Careful what you ask for. That's all I know, right?
Yeah.
Because it could be really taxing.
It could be, yes. You just want to really read through the guidelines, and each organization offers pretty detailed, especially with the federal grants and the state grants. They're going to have very detailed funder guidelines that you're going to want to review with a fine-tooth comb and make sure you understand what you are applying for and what the expectations are if you win the funding.
Hmm. So paint the picture. When's the right time for a client to come to you? And then walk a little bit more detail through the process. So for those listening who go, oh, I want to start a grant strategy. When do they approach Jordan?
Sure. So typically typically new nonprofits, they'll struggle to get funding in the very beginning because funders want to see that you are going to be a good steward of your money and you have proof in the years past that you were. So I recommend once you have your infrastructure ready, you have a strong and active board, and you've been with your 501c3 status for at least 2 years, then you can approach me and we can work together on a funding strategy. If a nonprofit comes to me before that point, I can help with getting you grant ready, funding ready. And for that, it will mostly be consulting services where we go through a checklist and we make sure what it is that we need to do to get you grant ready, which is going to be different for each organization because some organizations have everything that they need ready to go. They just need help with their building relationships with the funders in the area. And some people will come to me and they don't even have their status yet, their 501c3 status. For those,
Mm.
typically I will just recommend a couple things for them to do even before they want to work with me with consulting. Once those things are completed, they can come back and we'll work on getting them grant ready.
So you've mentioned a couple times relationship with the grantor.
Yes.
Would you just talk? I find that's fascinating because in my mind, I'm picturing, you go online and hit grant and you click a button and you submit it. But there's obviously more to that. So could you just talk about the importance of the relationship and how do you establish that? Why is that important?
Yeah, relationships with funders are very important. Again, like if you have it's kind of a give and take relationship, right? So if you're asking for money from someone, they want to be given something in return. A lot of times that is the impact that you're making in the community. But if you want to be even have a stronger relationship with that funder, look at their mission and their values and see what else it is that you could do for them to further their mission. And a lot of times if you're applying in this to this funder's grant opportunity, you guys are going to align in a mission or in value somewhere. And there's things that you can do, and it could vary. It could be volunteer opportunities, and it could be attending events with them, or putting on events together. There's a lot of things you can do, and it's going to depend on the funder. It's something that just having a conversation with them, reaching out via email, via phone, going down to, if you're local, going down to that organization's office and requesting, like, let's have a meeting, let's talk, let's see what we can do together to like make the community better. Just having a curious conversation.
That's fascinating. So who typically reaches out to you? Who picks up the phone and says, Jordan, I need to talk? What position in the nonprofit?
Yeah, it's typically, in my experience, it's typically been an executive director. So it's also, I've also had people who were working as consultants in the company or in the nonprofit, and they were like, hey, I think this could be really great for us. Would you be willing to have a conversation? And yes, always. I love having conversations and just learning about people and nonprofits and the community, people doing great things in the community. But it's typically the executive directors.
Okay. And is there a specific pain point for them that makes them wake up and go, oh my gosh, I got to pursue grants? Or is it more strategic than that?
It's definitely more strategic, but a lot of times it's going to be, we need money, we need funding, right? That is why people will come to me. And I can provide that knowledge of how to actually make that happen. A lot of times I've also experienced, a lot of the people I speak to, they've applied to lots of grants and not gotten any, and they're wondering why. So that's something I can look at. I look at the applications of the past. I can analyze what it is that they could have been doing differently or done better. Again, a lot of times it's impact tracking, relationship building with the funders. And so I'll look through like their paperwork with them and their past grants and decide, hey, tell them this is something you could do better, or this is not so strong here. Let's try again this way.
All right. In light of artificial intelligence, how is AI going to impact grant writing?
I think AI is going to benefit grant writers in the future because it's going to allow us to put out more applications, stronger applications for the organizations if we use it appropriately. Something to mention is that depending on the information that you're including in the AI, you're going to need to be careful because there are some information that you don't want to give it, as it is kind of open access, open source right now. I think eventually they will create AI that is a little more secure, and then we can approach that when that arises. But I also think that funders might experience that they're getting even more applications because of AI, and people being able to utilize it to put out so much more. And so that's something to keep in mind as well, that grants may become more competitive because of that. I know my mentor is Meredith Noble, and she is the owner of Learn Grant Writing, and she is huge in the AI space for grant writing. So checking her out would be my recommendation as well for more on that.
Oh, this is great. What a niche you've carved out. So people that are listening, board members, executive directors, how do they get in touch with you? How do they find more information about Captured Words Grant Consulting?
Sure. So you can email me at jordan.capturedwords@gmail.com, or you can go to my website, which is capturedwords.co.
Oh, I love the name. So how long did it take you to come up with the name of the organization, of your company?
Honestly, I came up with it a really long time ago.
Oh,
And it's just something that I was like, it's so cute. It was before I specifically was directly only doing grant writing, and I was doing more of creative writing, blog writing, and things. And I was capturing the words and creating storytelling, and I just thought it was fun and sweet. And it just carried over into grant writing. We're capturing funding, and we're doing that through words.
well, I love it. Jordan, you certainly have a gift, and to be able to share it with this nonprofit community is so special. Thank you for coming on to the I-501CU podcast. And anybody, please reach out to Jordan, especially if you want to establish a granting strategy.
Thank you so much, Michael.
All right, now it's time for Recapping with Reed. Reed, Jordan had a lot to say there. What are your three, or what are some of the many takeaways? Let's limit it to three.
When asked about what board members need to know about grant making, it might seem kind of basic to some of us who are in the nonprofit space, but just know that grants are given out in cycles. So if you pursue a grant at one time of the year, that money might not be coming right away, and it might take months to even years to acquire that grant, get rewarded that grant at the end of the day.
Very good. Number two.
When pursuing grants, make sure that your priorities, your organization's priorities, are aligned with the funder's priorities. That will help increase your chances of receiving that grant.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. And number three.
You can be strategic about which grants you pursue. You can call and ask the funder how many people are applying for this grant and how many get awarded. Determine how aligned you are with the funder's mission. If it's large funding from a federal or state organization, know that there might be other requirements you might have to comply with if you receive the grant. And we've learned with some organizations that not all federal and state grants are a positive thing in the overall scheme. It might be a ton of money, but it might be a lot more work for you to comply with said grant.
Something tells me that was 3 and 4. You wove in an extra one there. So I picked up on you sneaking that in. So there you have, ladies and gentlemen, Recapping with Reed and his 3, dare I say 4, observations from our interview with Jordan Curry. So there we go. And I will 501 see you all next week.